The billionaire placed a single bite of Wagyu in front of Maya and gave her an ultimatum. Identify the exact village of origin or clear out your locker and go back to whatever farm you crawled from. The entire kitchen staff held their breath. Maya closed her eyes, let the marbling melt across her tongue, and suddenly she was 8 years old again, standing in her grandmother's butcher shop. She opened her eyes and said 4 words that stopped the room cold. Takchama Village, Gifu Prefecture. The silence that followed was heavier than anything that kitchen had ever known. 23 line cooks, sous chefs, and servers stood frozen, waiting for the billionaire to speak. His name was Omar Al-Fayed, and he had built a restaurant empire across 3 continents by being ruthless, by demanding perfection, and by testing every employee until they broke. He had fired a sommelier in London for misidentifying a vintage by 2 years. He had made a Michelin-starred chef in Paris weep in front of his entire brigade over a slightly oversauced dish. And now, here in Dubai, he had placed a $20,000 bet with his dinner guests that the waitress would fail. But Maya hadn't failed. She had done what none of his experts could do, and in that moment, Omar Al-Fayed realized he had just been publicly humiliated by a woman he considered invisible. But to understand how Maya reached that moment, standing in that kitchen with the taste of takchama still on her tongue, you have to go back 20 years, to a village so small it didn't appear on most maps. The village sat in a valley in eastern Romania, where the Carpathian Mountains loomed like ancient guardians and the morning mist clung to the pastures long after sunrise. Every family raised livestock. Every family butchered their own meat. But only one family had the gift. Maya's grandmother, Elena, was the village butcher, and she possessed something that couldn't be taught in any culinary school. She could taste a piece of meat and tell you not just the breed of the animal, but the specific grass it had eaten, the mineral content of the soil it grazed on, the season it was slaughtered. The villagers called it simtal, the sense. Maya was 8 years old the first time her grandmother blindfolded her. The old woman placed a sliver of raw beef on her tongue and asked, "Where did this animal live?" Maya didn't know yet that this was impossible. She didn't know that scientists would dismiss such precision as fantasy. She simply closed her eyes, let the flavors unfold, and said, "The upper pasture, near the stream where the wild thyme grows." Her grandmother smiled, revealing teeth stained from a lifetime of black tea. The animal had indeed come from that exact hillside. This became their ritual. Every Saturday morning, before the village woke, Elena would blindfold her granddaughter and present samples. Lamb from the southern slope, pork from the oak forest where acorns fell, beef from the meadow where wild garlic grew. Maya learned to distinguish not just species and breeds, but the fingerprint of the land itself. The minerals in the water, the specific wildflowers the animals grazed, the very altitude of the pasture all left their mark on the fat and muscle. By the time Maya was 12, she could identify 14 distinct grazing territories within a 30-kilometer radius. Her grandmother told her this knowledge was in their blood, passed down through 5 generations of butchers who had served the old noble houses of Transylvania. Each generation refined the skill, each generation added new layers of understanding. And Maya, the old woman believed, was the most gifted of them all. But gifts don't pay hospital bills. When Maya was 22, her mother was diagnosed with a degenerative condition that required treatments the Romanian healthcare system couldn't provide. The family sold their livestock. They sold their land. They sold everything except the knowledge in Maya's head. And so, like thousands of Eastern Europeans before her, Maya made the impossible choice. She kissed her mother's forehead, promised to send money every month, and boarded a plane for Dubai. The city that greeted her was a monument to ambition. Glass towers pierced the desert sky, Lamborghinis purred at traffic lights, and everywhere there were restaurants serving the wealthiest palates on earth. Maya found work at a series of establishments, each more exclusive than the last. She started as a dishwasher, then a line cook, then a server. Her accent marked her as foreign, her gender marked her as invisible, but her palate, that secret gift, she kept hidden. She had learned quickly that standing out in Dubai's service industry was dangerous. The wrong kind of attention could get you fired, or worse. 3 years ago, she landed the position at Carnival Royale, Omar Al-Fayed's flagship steakhouse, on the 37th floor of a tower overlooking the Palm Jumeirah. The restaurant served only the finest Wagyu, imported directly from Japan's most prestigious prefectures. A single ribeye could cost more than Maya's monthly salary. The clientele was a parade of billionaires, royal family members, celebrities, and power brokers who treated the staff like furniture. Maya endured it all: the snapped fingers, the dismissive glances, the drunk patron who called her a village peasant and laughed. She smiled, she served, she sent 70% of her wages home to her mother. And what happened to her grandmother? Elena passed away 2 winters before Maya left for Dubai. On her deathbed, the old woman grasped Maya's hand and said, "What I taught you is worth more than money. Do not waste it. Do not hide it forever. The world will need your gift one day, and you must be ready." Maya had pressed her grandmother's hand to her cheek and wept because she didn't believe the world would ever care about a village butcher's skill. Now, let's talk about the man who nearly destroyed her. Omar Al-Fayed was born 62 years ago in a cramped Cairo apartment above his father's spice shop. The family sold cumin and coriander to local households, barely scraping together enough to eat. Omar's father had calloused hands and a bent spine from decades of hauling burlap sacks. He died when Omar was 14, leaving the boy with nothing but a brass scale and a lesson he never forgot. "The rich will always try to cheat you," his father said. "You must know your product better than they know their own tastes." Omar took that lesson and forged an empire. He started as a tea boy in a hotel kitchen, then worked his way up, learning every station, every technique, every secret of the trade. By 30, he owned his first restaurant in Alexandria. By 40, he had a dozen across the Middle East. By 50, Carnival Royale was the most acclaimed steakhouse in Dubai, and Omar Al-Fayed was worth $700 million. But the chip on his shoulder never shrank. If anything, it grew. He saw every interaction as a test of dominance, every employee as a potential disappointment. The restaurant industry is brutal enough, but Omar made it personal. He was notorious for staging public humiliations. A sous chef who slightly overcooked a Wagyu fillet was forced to eat the entire dish in front of the kitchen staff while Omar narrated the failures. A server who forgot a regular's wine preference was made to stand in the corner with a sign reading, "I am incompetent," for an entire dinner service. 3 employees had filed lawsuits. All had been settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements. His personal chef, a young Frenchman named Jean-Luc who had trained at Le Cordon Bleu, lasted exactly 19 days. The firing happened in the middle of a dinner party. Omar demanded Jean-Luc identify the origin of a slice of jamon iberico. The chef guessed Salamanca. It was from Extremadura. The difference was barely perceptible to anyone except a master. Omar fired him on the spot and had security escort him out while the guests applauded. The story became legend in Dubai's culinary circles. Anyone who worked for Omar Al-Fayed knew the rules. Perfection was the minimum requirement. Anything less was destruction. And yet, Maya had survived. She kept her head down, she did her job, she never volunteered information, she never drew attention to her palate. The kitchen staff knew she was different. The head chef, a grizzled Australian named Bruce, had once watched her adjust a sauce's seasoning by smell alone and asked if she was some kind of witch. Maya had just smiled and said her grandmother taught her. Bruce didn't press further. Good cooks recognize talent even when it hides. But on that particular night, the 18th of November, the rules changed. Omar Al-Fayed arrived at Carnival Royale with 3 guests. One was a Saudi oil minister. One was a Russian oligarch with a watch worth more than a Lamborghini. And the third was a man named Khalid bin Rashid, a Qatari investor who was Omar's most bitter rival. The 2 men had been competing for years, not just in business, but in ego. Khalid owned a rival steakhouse in Doha that had recently been awarded 3 Michelin stars. Omar's had only 2. The slight burned in Omar's chest like a hot coal. The conversation at the table turned to Wagyu. Khalid was boasting about a new supplier who could source beef so precise in origin that you could trace each cut to the individual cow and the hillside it grazed. Omar scoffed. He claimed that origin was marketing nonsense, that no human palate could distinguish one Japanese village from another. Khalid smirked and said, "Perhaps your palate cannot, but I guarantee someone in this city can." He then offered a bet, $20,000 to the charity of the winner's choice. Omar could select any cut of Wagyu from the kitchen. If any member of his staff could identify the village of origin by taste alone, Khalid would pay. If not, Omar would pay. Omar's pride ignited. $20,000 was nothing to him, but losing face in front of Khalid was everything. He called over his general manager and whispered instructions. The manager's face paled. "So that's not possible. We don't have anyone on staff who can." Omar cut him off with a raised finger. "Bring me the waitress who served our appetizers, the Eastern European one. She looks like she grew up on a farm. Let's see what the peasant knows." The manager hesitated. He knew what this meant. He had seen these tests before, but he also knew that refusing Omar Al-Fayed was not an option. He walked to the kitchen, found Maya polishing silverware, and told her to come to the main dining room. Maya sensed something was wrong. The manager wouldn't meet her eyes. The kitchen staff had fallen silent. Bruce, the head chef, gave her a look that was equal parts pity and warning. When Maya reached the table, Omar Al-Fayed looked up at her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, here she is. Our expert." The three guests turned to stare. Khalid leaned back in his chair, amused. "This is your master taster, Omar, a waitress." Omar ignored him. He gestured to a small plate on the table. On it sat a single bite-sized cube of Wagyu, lightly seared, glistening with fat. "This meat," Omar said, "comes from somewhere in Japan. I want you to taste it and tell me exactly where. Not the prefecture, the village." He paused, letting the absurdity of the demand settle over the room. Then he added with theatrical cruelty, "Guess the meat or you're worthless. And if you're worthless, you have no place in my restaurant. You're fired, effective immediately." Maya stood frozen. She could feel the eyes of the entire dining room on her. The other servers had stopped moving. The kitchen doors had cracked open, faces peering through. Even the pianist in the corner had lifted his hands from the keys. The silence was absolute. Maya could hear her own heartbeat. She looked at the cube of meat. And then somewhere in her memory, she heard her grandmother's voice. "What I taught you is worth more than money. Do not waste it." She took a breath. She stepped forward. She picked up the fork, lifted the piece of Wagyu to her lips, and closed her eyes. The entire room held its breath. And Maya bit down. Maya bit down. The Wagyu dissolved on her tongue like butter caught in a summer breeze. Most people taste only richness when they eat premium Wagyu, a tidal wave of fat that overwhelms every sensory channel at once. But Maya had been trained differently. Her grandmother had taught her to push past the fat, to let the initial wave crash and recede, to wait for the subtle currents beneath. That was where the truth lived. She kept her eyes closed, letting the flavors unfold in sequence. First came the marbling, that intricate spiderweb of intramuscular fat that distinguished Wagyu from all other beef. This was dense, incredibly dense, suggesting a breed with exceptional genetics. Not just any Wagyu, but Japanese black, the premier lineage. The fat melted at precisely 68 degrees Fahrenheit. She knew because she could feel it liquefying against her palate, releasing compounds that told stories. Then came the mineral notes. All beef carries the signature of the soil where the cattle grazed. The grass absorbs minerals from the earth. The cattle absorb the grass, and the meat becomes a geological fingerprint. Maya tasted magnesium, the kind found in volcanic soil. She tasted zinc and traces of selenium, a combination she recognized from the mountainous regions of central Japan. The granite bedrock of the Japanese Alps leached these specific minerals into the groundwater, which nourished the pastures, which fed the cattle. She was narrowing it down now, letting her mind drift across the map her grandmother had drawn for her in that small village kitchen. Hokkaido was too far north, its mineral profile dominated by iodine and salt from the sea air. Kyushu was too volcanic, its beef carrying a sulfurous undertone that this sample lacked. No, this was Honshu, the main island, and not just anywhere on Honshu. The mineral balance was too specific, too refined. The third layer was the grass itself. Wagyu cattle are raised on a carefully controlled diet that includes rice straw, wheat bran, and specific forage grasses. But even within that controlled environment, the local vegetation leaves its mark. Maya tasted clover, wild mint, and a particular variety of orchard grass that grew only at certain altitudes. She also detected the faintest hint of apple pumice, a byproduct of cider production that some Japanese farmers add to the feed to enhance sweetness. that told her the cattle were raised near apple orchards. In Japan, apple orchards were concentrated in Aomori and Nagano, but the mineral profile ruled out Aomori. It had to be somewhere in the Chubu region, the mountainous spine of Honshu. Now she was close. She could feel the answer taking shape. The fourth and final layer was the water. Each grazing territory has its own water source, and that water carries a unique blend of dissolved solids. Maya's grandmother had taught her that this was the hardest element to isolate because it was subtle, almost imperceptible. But Maya had been trained since childhood to separate these threads. The water in this beef was soft, slightly alkaline, carrying calcium carbonate from limestone aquifers and a trace of silica from mountain streams. It was the water of the Hida River, which flowed through the northern Alps of Gifu Prefecture, the river that ran through Takayama. Her mind clicked into place like a lock turning. The marbling profile of a Tajima bloodline Japanese black, the mineral signature of volcanic granite soil, the grass profile of high-altitude pastures near apple orchards, the water chemistry of the Hida River. There was only one place on Earth where all these elements converged. She opened her eyes. Akiyama Village, Gifu Prefecture. The words hung in the air like a verdict. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Omar Al-Fayed stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then Khalid bin Rashid began to laugh, a deep, rolling sound that filled the silence. He slapped the table. He pointed at Omar. "You magnificent fool," he said, wiping his eyes. "You had a genius working in your restaurant and you were about to fire her." Omar's face shifted through several colors. First, the pallor of shock, then the flush of rage, then something else, something Maya hadn't expected: calculation. He was a businessman first and a bully second, and the businessman in him had just realized that the woman standing before him was worth far more than her job. "What is your name?" he demanded. "Maya," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Maya Kostash." "Open the kitchen," Omar commanded, rising from his seat. "I want to see the packaging. Every box, every certificate, every import document for this Wagyu. Now." The general manager scrambled to comply. Within minutes, the kitchen had produced the original shipping crate from Japan. The documents were in Japanese, but the restaurant's head sushi chef, a man from Osaka named Tanaka, was summoned to translate. The Wagyu had indeed come from Takayama Village, from a specific farm called a Sakura Ranch, a boutique producer that raised fewer than 40 head of cattle per year. The beef was Hidajayu, the officially certified brand of Gifu Prefecture, rated A5, the highest possible grade. Omar stared at the documents, then at Maya, then back at the documents. He was not a man who apologized. He did not know how. Instead, he said, "You will come to my office tomorrow morning. We need to discuss your future." Then he turned to Khalid. "You win the bet, 20,000 to whatever charity you choose." Khalid waved a dismissive hand. "Forget the bet. I want to know more about this woman." He turned to Maya with genuine curiosity. "How did you do that?" "I have eaten Wagyu in 37 different restaurants across Japan. I have dined with master butchers and celebrated chefs. I have never seen anyone do what you just did." Maya hesitated. She could feel the weight of the room pressing on her, dozens of eyes demanding an explanation. She thought of her grandmother, of the thousands of Saturday mornings, of the blindfolds and the tastings. She thought of her mother, lying in a hospital bed in Romania, waiting for the next wire transfer. She thought of the years she had spent hiding this skill, afraid of exactly this kind of attention. And then she decided that hiding was no longer an option. "My grandmother was a butcher," she said. Her grandmother was a butcher. Her grandmother's grandmother served the royal courts of Transylvania. "We have been studying meat for 200 years. What you just witnessed was not a trick. It was a family inheritance." The room erupted in whispers. Phones had appeared, recording everything. Someone had already posted a clip of the moment to Instagram. By morning, it would be everywhere. But Omar Al-Fayed was not interested in family history. He was interested in value. That night, as Maya returned to her shared apartment in the Satwa district, exhausted and overwhelmed, Omar was on the phone with his lawyers. He had a proposition to craft, one that would change everything. The next morning, Maya arrived at Carnivore Royale's administrative offices as instructed. She had barely slept. Her phone had been buzzing all night with messages from co-workers, journalists, and strangers who had seen the video. She had ignored them all. She wore her only blazer, a black one she had purchased at a second-hand shop in Deira, and she had pulled her hair back so tightly it hurt. Omar's office was as intimidating as the man himself. Floor to ceiling, windows overlooked the marina skyline. A desk carved from a single slab of African mahogany dominated the space. On the walls hung photographs of Omar with various celebrities, a handshake with a Saudi prince, a grinning selfie with a Hollywood star, a formal portrait with a European head of state. There was no art, no personal touches, nothing that suggested warmth. The room was a monument to power. Omar sat behind the desk, his fingers steepled. Standing beside him was a man Maya had never seen before, a pale, thin figure in an expensive gray suit. He had the cold eyes of a lawyer. "Ms. Kostash," Omar began, not offering her a seat. "What you did last night was remarkable. I have spent 30 years in this industry. I have trained with master chefs in Paris, Tokyo, and New York. I have built an empire on the principle that excellence is the only currency that matters. And yet, in all my years, I have never encountered anyone with your particular skill set." Maya said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than speaking. "I want to hire you," Omar continued. "Not as a waitress, not as a server. I want you to become my personal meat sommelier. You will travel with me to auctions in Japan. You will taste and verify every shipment of Wagyu that comes into my restaurants. You will train my staff to recognize quality at your level. In exchange, I will pay you 200,000 dirhams per year, provide housing, and cover your mother's medical expenses in full." The number hit Maya like a physical blow. 200,000 dirhams was more than 50,000 American dollars. It was 4 times what she earned now. With that money, she could move her mother to a private clinic. She could bring her siblings to Dubai. She could build a life that didn't involve scrubbing plates and enduring abuse. But before she could respond, the lawyer spoke. His name was Mr. Sterling, and his accent was British, clipped, and precise. "There is, of course, a contractual obligation," he said, sliding a thick document across the desk. "Mr. Al-Fayed is making a significant investment. He requires exclusivity. For the duration of your 5-year contract, you will not work for any other restaurant, speak to any media outlet, or disclose any aspect of your tasting methodology without his express permission. You will also sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the inner workings of his businesses." Standard terms for a position of this nature. Maya picked up the contract with trembling hands. The paper was heavy, expensive, the kind her grandmother would have admired. She flipped through the pages, seeing phrases like intellectual property assignment and liquidated damages and mandatory arbitration. She was not a lawyer. She had never signed anything more complex than a rental agreement, but she understood enough to know that this contract would make her Omar Al-Fayed's property. "Can I take this with me?" she asked. "To review." Mr. Sterling glanced at Omar. The billionaire gave a slight nod. "You have 48 hours, Omar said. "After that, the offer expires. I have a restaurant to run, Ms. Kostash. I do not have time to wait while you deliberate." Maya left the office clutching the contract like a live grenade. She walked through the gleaming lobby, past the security guards, out into the blinding Dubai sun. Her mind was racing. On one hand, this was everything she had ever wanted. Financial security, medical care for her mother, recognition for her gift. On the other hand, she had seen what Omar did to people who failed him. She had seen the chef forced to eat his own mistakes. She had seen the waitress holding the "I am incompetent" sign. What would happen when Omar demanded she perform a tasting and she was tired or sick or simply wrong? She was human. Her gift was extraordinary but not infallible. If she made a mistake under that contract, she could lose everything, and Omar had the resources to destroy her. That evening, she called her mother in Romania. The connection was poor, crackling with static, but she could hear the weakness in her mother's voice. The treatments weren't working. The doctors were talking about a more aggressive protocol, one that cost 3 times as much. Maya didn't mention the contract. She didn't mention Omar Al-Fayed. She just listened to her mother talk about the garden, about the neighbor who had brought soup, about the stray cat that had given birth under the porch. And when she hung up, she wept. The next morning, a new video appeared online. This one was longer, more detailed. Someone at the restaurant had recorded the entire incident from a kitchen doorway, capturing not just the tasting but the lead-up, the bet, the humiliation. The video went viral within hours. The hashtag "the waitress who knew" trended on Twitter. News outlets in Dubai, London, and New York ran segments about the mysterious Romanian server with the supernatural palate. Someone dug up Maya's immigration records. Someone else found her mother's hospital bills and started a GoFundMe. The attention was overwhelming, invasive, terrifying. And then the phone call came. It was Khalid bin Rashid, the Qatari investor who had won the bet. He had tracked down her number through a mutual contact. "Ms. Kostash," he said, his voice warm but serious, "I've been watching the coverage. I've also been watching Omar Al-Fayed for 20 years. Before you sign that contract, I think there are some things you should know." What he told her changed everything. Omar Al-Fayed was not just a demanding boss. He was a man with a documented history of exploiting talent and discarding it. He had lured chefs from Michelin-starred restaurants with promises of partnership, only to bury them in restrictive contracts and abandon them when they failed to produce immediate results. He had sued a former employee into bankruptcy for violating a non-compete clause. He had destroyed careers with the same casual cruelty he used to humiliate waitresses. Khalid knew this because he had watched it happen to a friend, a brilliant young chef from Morocco who had worked for Omar, signed a contract, and ended up deported when Omar's lawyers found a technicality in his visa. "I'm not telling you to refuse the offer," Khalid said, "but I am telling you to be very careful, and if you decide you want an alternative, I would be interested in discussing it. My steakhouse in Doha could use someone with your talents. And I don't believe in treating my employees like prisoners." Maya hung up the phone with the contract still unsigned. She had 24 hours left. The world was watching, and she had no idea what she was going to do. But Omar Al-Fayed was not a patient man. And when he saw the news coverage, when he saw Khalid's name appearing alongside Maya's in article after article, he decided to accelerate the timeline. He didn't want to lose her to his rival. And if he couldn't have her, no one would. That evening, Maya received a text message from an unknown number. It contained a single photograph, her mother's house in Romania, taken from across the street. The message beneath it read, "Sign the contract or go back to the village. You have until midnight." Maya stared at the photograph on her phone until the screen dimmed. Her mother's house, the faded blue shutters, the apple tree in the front yard, its branches bare in the Romanian winter. The angle of the photo suggested it was taken from the narrow lane that ran alongside the property, the one only the milkman and the neighbor with the 3 goats ever used. Someone had been there. Someone had stood on that lane, pointed a camera at her mother's home, and sent the image to her phone with a threat attached. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely unlock the device to call home. The phone rang 7 times before her mother answered, her voice groggy with sleep and medication. "Mama, is everything okay? Is anyone there with you?" Her mother was confused. Of course she was fine. The neighbor had brought soup. The cat had caught a mouse in the kitchen. Why was Maya calling so late? Maya didn't tell her about the photograph. She couldn't. Instead, she said she loved her, said she would call again soon, and hung up before her voice could break. She sat on the edge of her bed, the unsigned contract lying on the nightstand like a coiled snake. The clock on her phone read 9:47. 2 hours and 13 minutes until midnight. 2 hours and 13 minutes to decide whether to sign away 5 years of her life or risk whatever Omar Al-Fayed's message implied. The first thing she did was call Bruce, the head chef. Bruce answered on the second ring, his Australian accent thick with concern. He had seen the video. Everyone had seen the video. "Bruce, I need to know something. Has Omar ever actually hurt anyone? I mean physically?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then Bruce said, "Not that I can prove, but I've heard things. There was a manager at the Abu Dhabi location, a Pakistani guy named Hamza. He quit without notice about 4 years ago. A week later, his family back in Lahore got a visit from some men claiming to be debt collectors. His father ended up in the hospital. Hamza dropped his labor complaint the next day." Maya felt ice spreading through her chest. "Did you report this? To who?" "The police here. Half of them eat free at the restaurant. Maya, you need to understand how things work in this city. Omar Al-Fayed is not just a businessman. His family has connections that go back decades across half the Middle East. He donates to political campaigns. He sits on government advisory boards. He's not someone you make an enemy of. But there was something else, something Bruce was hesitating to say. Maya could hear it in his breathing. What? What aren't you telling me? Another pause. Then that video, the one that went viral, it wasn't an accident. What do you mean? The guy who recorded it, the kitchen porter who had his phone out, his name is Ahmed. He quit this morning. Word is, someone paid him 50,000 dirhams for that footage. He was bragging about it in the staff WhatsApp group before he disappeared. Maya's mind raced. If the video had been orchestrated, if Omar had wanted the footage to spread, then the entire spectacle, the bet, the humiliation, the challenge, had been a setup from the beginning. Omar hadn't just been testing her. He had been showcasing her. He had wanted the world to see what she could do, because the world seeing it made her valuable in a way that went far beyond a single restaurant's kitchen. And the more valuable she became, the more he could justify any means necessary to control her. She thanked Bruce and hung up. The clock now read 9:58. She had 2 hours and 2 minutes. Her next call was to Khalid bin Rashid. He answered immediately, as if he had been waiting. "I received your message," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You said you could offer an alternative, but I need to know right now if you're serious, because Omar just threatened my family. He sent me a photograph of my mother's house." Khalid's tone shifted instantly from polite businessman to something harder. "Send me the photograph and the message right now." She did. She heard him breathing as he examined them. Then he said, "I'm going to be very direct with you, Ms. Kostash. Omar Al-Fayed has been doing this for years. He finds people who are vulnerable, immigrants, people with families in countries where the police can be bought. He pressures them into contracts that strip them of their rights. And when they try to leave, he destroys them. I've watched it happen to 4 people I know personally. Then why hasn't anyone stopped him? Because he's very careful. He never leaves a paper trail that can be tied directly to him. That photograph, that message, it came from an unknown number. I guarantee you that number will be untraceable within 24 hours. If you go to the police, they'll file a report and nothing will happen. Meanwhile, someone will visit your mother again, and it won't just be a photograph." Maya pressed her palm against her forehead. "So what do I do? Just sign the contract?" "No," Khalid's voice was firm. "You fight, but you fight smart. I have resources Omar doesn't know about. I have lawyers who specialize in exactly this kind of case. If you're willing to trust me, I can get you and your mother protection within 48 hours, but you have to stall him. You have to buy us time. His deadline is midnight tonight. That's less than 2 hours. Then sign the contract." "What? Sign it tonight." A contract signed under duress with a death threat attached is not enforceable in any legitimate court. Moreover, the moment you sign, he thinks he's won. He'll stop pressuring you, he'll drop his guard. And that's when we move, record everything. Every conversation, every threat. Build a case while he's busy celebrating. Maya felt dizzy. "But if I sign, I'm legally bound to..." "You're legally bound to nothing if we can prove coercion. And Ms. Kostash, I have a team of investigators who are very good at proving coercion. Trust me." She didn't know if she could. Trust had never come easily to Maya. She had grown up in a country where trusting the wrong person could mean losing everything, but she had no other options. At 11:43, 17 minutes before the deadline, she opened the contract, signed her name on every flagged line, and sent a photograph of the signed documents to the number that had sent the threat. The reply came within 60 seconds. "Wise choice, welcome to the family," but it wasn't over. In fact, it was only beginning. The next morning, Maya reported to Carnivore Royale as instructed. She was no longer a waitress. She was now officially the restaurant's executive sensory director, a title that had been invented specifically for her. Her first task was to travel with Omar to an upcoming Wagyu auction in Tokyo, where she would taste and verify every lot before purchase. She was given a new apartment, a studio in the marina that cost more per month than she had earned in a year. She was given a wardrobe of designer clothes, appropriate for someone representing the Al-Fayed brand. She was given a driver, a phone, and a schedule packed with obligations. And through it all, she was recording. Khalid's team had equipped her with a small button camera disguised as a brooch and a recording app that automatically uploaded conversations to a secure server in Switzerland. Every meeting with Omar, every conversation with Mr. Sterling, every threat veiled as professional guidance was captured and stored. Within 2 weeks, she had amassed hours of material. Omar bragging about bribing a food inspector, Sterling explaining how the non-compete clause could be used to prevent her from ever working in the restaurant industry again if she left. Omar making casual references to friends in Romania who could check on her mother anytime. But the real bombshell came during a dinner at Omar's private residence 3 weeks after she signed. The event was a gathering of investors, men with titles like sheikh and minister and chairman. Maya was brought in to perform a tasting for the guests, to demonstrate what Omar called my greatest acquisition. She identified 6 cuts of Wagyu from 6 different Japanese prefectures, each one perfectly, to the stunned applause of the audience. Afterward, as the guests mingled, Maya overheard a conversation she was never meant to hear. Omar was speaking with a man named Victor, a Russian with a gold tooth and a bodyguard who never smiled. They were discussing a shipment of Wagyu that had been intercepted by customs in Rotterdam. Victor was complaining about the inspection fees, the delays. Omar laughed and said something that made Maya's blood run cold. "Don't worry about customs. I have a contact in the inspection office who can clear anything we need. Wagyu, caviar, whatever. As long as the labels look official, nobody checks too closely." Victor asked something about authenticity. Omar's response was casual, dismissive. 90% of what I serve is real. The other 10%, who can tell the difference? I have a girl who can taste a village in a single bite, and even she only tastes what I want her to taste. The implication was devastating. Omar wasn't just buying premium Wagyu, he was passing off inferior beef as top grade, relying on his reputation and his staff to maintain the illusion. And Maya, the woman he had hired to verify authenticity, was being used as a prop. He didn't need her to be accurate. He needed her to be famous enough that no one would question the quality. She recorded every word. The audio was crystal clear, Omar's voice unmistakable. When she sent the file to Khalid's team that night, the lawyer called her immediately. "This is bigger than we thought. This isn't just labor abuse. This is fraud, international fraud. If this goes public, Omar Al-Fayed goes to prison." But going public would also mean destroying herself. She had signed the contract. She was complicit, even if unknowingly. If the fraud was exposed, she would be dragged into the investigation. Her reputation, her career, her very ability to stay in the country would be at risk. Omar had trapped her more thoroughly than she had realized. And then, a week later, everything changed again. Maya's mother stopped answering her phone. At first, Maya assumed it was a network issue. The mobile service in rural Romania was unreliable, especially in winter. But after 2 days of silence, she called the neighbor, the one with the goats. The neighbor said she hadn't seen Maya's mother in 3 days. The house was locked. The lights were off. The cat was meowing on the porch, hungry and abandoned. Maya called the local police. They promised to check. An hour later, they called back. The house was empty. No sign of forced entry, no sign of struggle. Just an empty house with the dishes still in the sink and a half-finished cup of tea on the kitchen table. Her mother had simply vanished. Maya knew exactly who was responsible. She called Omar directly, something she had never done before. He answered with the same casual arrogance he always used. "Maya, what a pleasant surprise. Where is my mother?" A pause, then softly, "I don't know what you're talking about. The photograph, the threat, you made it very clear what would happen if I didn't cooperate. I signed your contract. I did everything you asked. Now my mother is missing. Where is she?" Omar's tone shifted. The charm evaporated, replaced by something cold and reptilian. "Let me be very clear, Ms. Kostash. I have invested a great deal in you, your apartment, your salary, your training. The auction in Tokyo next month is the most important of my career, and I need you at your best. If personal distractions are interfering with your performance, I suggest you resolve them quickly, because if you fail me, the consequences will extend far beyond your mother." The line went dead. Maya stood in her marina apartment, staring at the Dubai skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, and realized she had reached the end of everything she could handle alone. Omar had her mother, he had her contract, he had her reputation, he had the police in his pocket, and his tentacles spread across continents. She was a waitress from a Romanian village, and she was fighting a man worth $700 million with nothing but a hidden camera and a Qatari rival who might decide she was too much trouble to protect. She had one move left, one desperate, all-or-nothing play. and it would require her to do something Omar would never expect, something that would turn the entire situation inside out and put her in control for the first time since this nightmare began. She picked up her phone and called Khalid. "I need you to arrange a press conference," she said. "I'm going to tell the world everything, but I'm going to do it on one condition. Omar has to be in the room." Khalid was silent for a moment. Then he said, "That's either the bravest thing I've ever heard or the most reckless." "It's both," Maya said, "but it's the only way to save my mother and take him down at the same time. Make the calls, I'll be ready." The date was set. The location was the ballroom of a hotel in Doha that Khalid owned, a neutral ground that Omar couldn't control. Invitations went out to every major news outlet in the Gulf, framed as a major announcement from the viral Waitress Who Knew. Omar, convinced that Maya was about to publicly endorse his brand and solidify his reputation, agreed to attend. He thought he had won. He had no idea what was about to hit him. The ballroom of the Al Maha Hotel in Doha was packed to capacity. Every major news network in the Gulf had sent a crew. Al Jazeera had a full production team. CNN International was broadcasting live. The wooden podium at the front of the room stood empty, waiting for the woman whose face had been splashed across screens for weeks. Maya Kostash, the waitress who could taste a village in a single bite. Omar Al-Fayed sat in the front row, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit, his expression composed and satisfied. He had flown in on his private jet that morning with 6 members of his legal team. He believed this press conference was a public relations coup, orchestrated by his own brilliance. The woman he had plucked from obscurity was about to announce an exclusive partnership. The world would see that Omar Al-Fayed recognized talent, that he elevated the worthy, that his empire was built on excellence. He had already drafted a press release describing Maya as a diamond discovered in the rough, polished by Al-Fayed hospitality into a global asset. Beside him sat Mr. Sterling, the lawyer, reviewing the final terms of the endorsement deal they expected Maya to sign on camera. The contract had been sweetened, if only temporarily. A bonus of 500,000 dirhams for the performance, a promise never written that her mother would be located and returned once the cameras stopped rolling. They believed they had won. At precisely 2 o'clock, Maya walked onto the stage. She wore a simple dark dress, her hair pulled back in the same severe bun she had worn as a server. She carried no notes, no script, no prepared remarks. Behind her, a large screen had been set up, its purpose unknown to the audience. The only person who knew what she was about to do was Khalid bin Rashid, standing in the wings with a team of security personnel and 2 representatives from the Qatari Ministry of Interior. Maya approached the podium. The cameras zoomed in. The room fell silent. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice carrying across the ballroom with a steadiness that surprised even herself. "My name is Maya Kostash. 3 weeks ago, I was a waitress at Carnival Royale in Dubai. Today, I am here to tell you the truth about the man who sits in front of you." Omar's smile flickered. He glanced at Sterling, who shrugged almost imperceptibly. This was not the script they had approved. Maya pressed a button on the podium, and the screen behind her flickered to life. The first image was the photograph of her mother's house, the one that had been texted to her along with the midnight ultimatum. The audience murmured. "This photograph was sent to me by associates of Omar Al-Fayed on the night of November 18th. It was accompanied by a threat: sign a 5-year contract or face consequences that extended to my family. My mother, a 67-year-old woman recovering from a degenerative illness, was used as leverage to force my cooperation." Sterling rose from his seat, his face white with fury. "This is slander. Turn off the cameras immediately." But the cameras kept rolling. The security guards who moved toward the stage were intercepted by Khalid's men. Omar remained seated, his jaw tight, his eyes boring into Maya with a hatred so pure it seemed to heat the air. The screen changed. Now it displayed excerpts from the contract, sections highlighted in yellow. Maya read them aloud. The non-compete clause that would bar her from working in any food-related industry for a decade. The intellectual property assignment that gave Al-Fayed hospitality ownership of her tasting methodology. The mandatory arbitration provision that stripped her of the right to sue. "I am not a lawyer," Maya said, but I have been advised that contracts signed under threat of harm are not enforceable. I am here to tell you that I will not be honoring this agreement, and I am here to tell you why." The screen changed again. This time, it played audio. Omar's voice filled the ballroom, rich and unmistakable. "I have a contact in the inspection office who can clear anything we need. Wagyu, caviar, whatever. As long as the labels look official, nobody checks too closely." Then, after a pause, 90% of what I serve is real. The other 10%, who can tell the difference?" The audience erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras swung toward Omar, capturing his expression as it shifted from outrage to horror to something approaching panic. Sterling was shouting about illegal recordings and defamation, but nobody was listening. The evidence was playing on a screen 30 feet wide. Maya held up her hand, and the room quieted, the weight of her presence now undeniable. That recording was made 3 weeks ago in Omar Al-Faid's private residence. It documents him admitting to international food fraud, but that is not all I discovered. The screen changed one more time. A photograph appeared, a package of Wagyu, its Japanese import label clearly visible. Next to it, a laboratory analysis report from the Doha Food Safety Authority. Maya had provided samples to Khalid's team, who had commissioned the analysis through official channels. The results were damning. "This beef," Maya said, pointing to the image, "was served at Carnivore Royale as A5 Hidajayu from Takyama village. I tasted it myself." But the DNA analysis shows something Omar Al-Faid never anticipated. The cattle from which this beef was sourced were not purebred Japanese black. They were crossbred with a Korean Hanmu lineage that has been illegally introduced into the Gifu breeding program. The marbling score is inflated. The genetic profile is compromised. This Wagyu is fraudulent, not only in origin but in breed. The deception extends all the way to the farms in Japan that supply Al-Faid's restaurants. The room fell into a stunned silence. This was bigger than fraud. This was an international scandal that implicated Japanese breeding associations, customs officials, and a billionaire restaurateur who had built his reputation on selling the world's most expensive meat. Maya leaned into the microphone, her voice dropping to something intimate and fierce. "My grandmother taught me to taste the truth, and the truth is this. Omar Al-Faid has been selling counterfeit Wagyu to the wealthiest people on earth for years. He used my reputation, a reputation he tried to own, to cover it up." Omar stood up. His composure had shattered. His face was purple with rage, the same shade it had been when he had forced Maya to taste that first piece of Wagyu. But this time he was not in control. This time he was the one on display. "You will regret this," he hissed, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "You have no idea what I am capable of." Maya looked at him without flinching. "I know exactly what you are capable of. You are capable of threatening a sick woman to pressure her daughter. You are capable of bribing inspectors and falsifying documents. You are capable of destroying anyone who gets in your way." She reached beneath the podium and produced a small USB drive. "And every bit of it is on this drive. The threats, the fraud, the admissions of guilt. Copies have already been delivered to the Dubai Public Prosecution, the Qatari Ministry of Commerce, and the Japanese Embassy." At that moment, the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. A woman in a wheelchair was pushed through by a paramedic, accompanied by 2 Qatari police officers. It was Maya's mother. Maya's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she rushed from the stage, abandoning the podium and the cameras to kneel beside her mother's chair. The old woman was pale and thin, but alive. She reached out a trembling hand and touched her daughter's face. "Elena would be so proud of you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos of the room. Maya learned later what had happened. Omar's men had indeed taken her mother from the house in Romania. They had driven her to a remote cabin in the Carpathian foothills, where she was held under guard for nearly 2 weeks. But Khalid's investigators, working with Interpol and Romanian authorities, had tracked the location through a series of financial transactions that one of the guards had carelessly made with a stolen credit card. The cabin had been raided at dawn that very morning. The guards had been arrested. Maya's mother had been flown to Doha on a medical transport plane, arriving just in time for the press conference. Omar Al-Fayed was taken into custody by Qatari police moments after Maya finished speaking. The charges would multiply over the following weeks. Kidnapping, fraud, bribery, coercion. His empire, built on intimidation and deception, collapsed within days. The restaurants were shuttered. The investors fled. The Japanese breeding associations launched their own investigations, uncovering a web of corruption that reached far beyond a single billionaire in Dubai. And Maya. She did not return to serving tables. Khalid bin Rashid made good on his promise, not with a job offer, but with a partnership. Together, they founded the Simtol Institute, named after the Romanian word for the sense, a research and certification body dedicated to the scientific validation of sensory expertise. Maya became its first director. She traveled the world, lecturing at culinary schools, training sommeliers and chefs, and developing protocols that would make her grandmother's ancient knowledge accessible to a new generation. The most surprising moment came 6 months after the press conference. A delegation from Gifu Prefecture arrived at the Institute's offices in Doha, led by the governor himself. They had come to thank Maya for exposing the fraud that had tainted their region's reputation, and they had come with an invitation. Would she consider serving as a consultant to the Hida Beef Brand Promotion Conference, the very body that certified authentic Wagyu from Takayama? They wanted her palate, her grandmother's legacy, to become part of their official quality control process. Maya accepted. She traveled to Takayama village, to the very place she had identified in that tense kitchen moment. She walked through the pastures where the cattle grazed, tasted the grass that gave the beef its distinctive flavor, and met the farmers whose livelihoods she had helped to protect. In a small ceremony at the Asakura ranch, the oldest breeder in the village presented her with a certificate of honor, and an old farmer with hands like leather and eyes that crinkled when he smiled whispered something that stayed with her forever. "Your grandmother would have been welcome here," he said. She understood what we understand, that meat is not just food. It is a story of the land, and only those who listen carefully can read it. That evening, standing on a hillside overlooking the village, Maya called her mother, who was recovering well in a private clinic in Dubai. The sun was setting behind the northern Alps, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. She thought of Elena, of the Saturday mornings with blindfolds and slivers of raw beef, of the old woman's hands guiding her young palate toward a truth the world had forgotten. "Grandmother," she whispered into the wind, "you were right. The world needed this gift after all." And so ended the transformation of Maya Kostash, from a waitress who was told she was worthless to a woman who proved that ancient wisdom, passed down through generations of village butchers, could take on a billion-dollar empire and win. The billionaire who humiliated her is now serving a 15-year sentence in a Dubai prison. The mother she fought to save is healthy and living in a home paid for by a grateful Japanese prefecture. And the gift, the Simtol that Elena Kostash entrusted to her granddaughter on that dusty Romanian hillside, is now recognized as one of the most remarkable sensory abilities ever documented. Some gifts are worth more than money, and some people, the ones the world calls invisible, turn out to be the most extraordinary of all. Some gifts are worth more than money, and some people, the ones the world calls invisible, turn out to be the most extraordinary of all. Maya Kostash's story is exceptional, but it is not unique. In every village, in every immigrant community, in every restaurant kitchen and factory floor and street corner, there are people carrying knowledge that has been passed down through generations. Knowledge that doesn't appear on resumes. Knowledge that can't be measured by standardized tests or validated by prestigious degrees. A grandmother's healing hands. A father's instinct for the weather. A mother's ability to read a stranger's intentions in a single glance. These are the currencies of survival, traded quietly while the world chases louder forms of wealth. What made Maya different was not the gift itself. It was the moment she chose to use it. The moment she stopped hiding. For years, she believed that her grandmother's teaching had no value in the glittering towers of Dubai. She believed that the rich would never take her seriously, that her accent marked her as lesser, that her skill was a relic of a world she had left behind. But when a life hung in the balance, when her dignity and her family were threatened, she discovered that the knowledge she carried was not a relic at all. It was a weapon. And that is the question this story leaves with you. What is the weapon you are hiding? What is the gift you have dismissed because it didn't come with a certificate? What skill passed down through your own family have you buried under the weight of other people's expectations? Because the truth is, you don't know when you will be called to use it. You don't know when a crisis will arrive that requires not your degree, not your job title, but the thing that only you can do. And when that moment comes, you will have to decide, just as Maya did, whether to stay invisible or to step forward. The billionaire who thought he owned her learned the hard way that decency cannot be purchased and talent cannot be caged. The Japanese farmers who welcomed her discovered that authenticity has guardians in the most unexpected places. And the world, watching through grainy cell phone footage, was reminded that the people who serve our food, clean our floors, and stand silently in the corners of expensive rooms are often the ones carrying the deepest wells of wisdom. Maya still visits Takayama every spring. She walks the pastures, tastes the grass, and spends long evenings with the farmers who have become her second family. Her mother, fully recovered, has moved to a small house in the mountains of Gifu, where she tends a garden and tells visitors about her daughter, who can taste the earth itself. The Simtol Institute now trains sensory evaluators from 43 countries, and its certification is recognized as the gold standard in the global meat industry. Omar Al-Fayed watches it all from a prison cell, a cautionary tale whispered in culinary academies worldwide. But the real legacy of this story is not an institute or a certification. It is a simple truth that Maya learned from her grandmother and proved to the world on that tense night in Dubai. Every piece of meat tells a story of the land that raised it. Every person carries a story of the people who shaped them. And those stories, when honored, can topple empires. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more documentaries about extraordinary people who changed their worlds. Let us know in the comments what hidden gift your family passed down to you. We read every story, and we might just feature it in a future episode. Until next time, remember, you are never as invisible as you think, and the knowledge inside you is worth more than you know.